It's quite beautiful when it rains out here on the farm. I love watching how all the water flows, so I can kind of get an idea of the elevations of the land, because actually when you stand in one spot, the land looks pretty flat and uniform, but there's definitely some signs of how the water's flowing and everything after a good rain. We probably got 3 or 4 inches of rain again after the soil was already damp, but see, you can kind of disturb the water a little bit and get an idea of which way the water's flowing. See, the dirt's all running that way, and then this all actually is flowing down that way towards the tiny house, and it kind of stops in that little pond area down there. But just kind of being out here during all the different seasons and the different weather events, you can kind of get a bigger concept of what you're going to do with your land. Like right now, I'm trying to make a lot of plans and notes for how I'm going to work with the water on the land, the hydrology, because I'd like to incorporate a bunch of permaculture concepts like swales and retention ponds and things like that, so that I can utilize all this rainwater. At least in the last 3 or 4 years, Oklahoma has been, or northeast Oklahoma where we're at, has been a really prolific amount of rain, and if I could capture and store and use as much of it on the property as possible, it's gonna increase my odds for a successful homestead. So right now I'm still in the planning phase. I'm still kind of looking at how all the elevations are and where I'm going to put my buildings and where I'm going to need to put ponds and what would be the best places for the ponds. So being out here and observing it and stuff is a real key to getting an idea and wrapping your mind around everything that you're going to do. Yeah, last year when I just had 2 pigs, their mama and daddy, over in this pen, I was able to keep up with the moisture that accumulates and the crap that accumulates just by using all the bags of leaves and grass clippings that I could find when I was driving around town. But this year, with 3 pigs, that hasn't quite been enough, and the manure's been getting ahead of me, and right now they've got like a pond created all around their little hut there. So I'm gonna have to break down and buy some big round bales of straw so that I can keep that properly knocked down with compost on top, with mulch on top of it, because it really starts stinking. Like right now it doesn't really stink because it's been raining, but tomorrow when it warms up, it'll have a real unique odor and kind of smells a nuisance. So I was supposed to butcher Ted today, take him down to the processing plant. Last year I killed his daddy, and me and a buddy were able to process him here on the farm, but that was quite a bit of work, and it's really a 2-man job for an animal that big. And I definitely didn't utilize all the different cuts of meat properly. I just kind of chopped it all up into baggy sized portions and put it in the freezer, and we just cooked it and ate it, not caring what cut it was. But taking them to the processing plant, it cost 45 cents a pound, plus a $25 kill fee. So I'm estimating he's probably at least 110, maybe 130 pounds. I don't know, I haven't picked him up in a while. They've gotten too big. So I'm gonna get rid of Ted because he's the only one that keeps getting out and ravaging my garden beds, and I can't be having that. Luckily I didn't plant anything that, except for like root crops this year. Everything else I've just been seeding from like all this stuff that the pigs eat. The seeds left over end up in the compost, and I've been spreading the compost out and throwing tomatoes and peppers and melons and stuff like that around from the extra produce that I have to try to get that all seeded. So basically anything I have will be volunteers this year. Like this is probably a squash or a melon, and I've got that kind of little stuff coming up all over. But all the seedlings that were coming up at the beginning of the year got knocked down by the hailstorm we had a couple days ago. But as you can see, like the root crops survived. Here's like a potato. I got a bunch of garlic and potatoes all around, and I'm just trying to get them to establish themselves. Yeah, as you can see, water's a big issue here with the pig pen, and they do kind of like having a little mud hole. So I'll probably leave them that one over there by the water bucket, or one of them, so they can get in the mud and cool off. But the rest of it I'm gonna try to cover up with straw, just to knock down the smell and make compost. But that is one thing, like as far as collecting rainwater, here's all the water that's coming out of their pen, and that's running downhill. And right now there's just garden beds and stuff over here, but you definitely would want to put some space or some elevation between you and your pig pen if you're going to be catching the water for any kind of, you know, any kind of uses for yourself, like, you know, dishwater or drinking water or whatever like that. But yes, this actually would probably be pretty good for the plants that are growing downhill, because it's kind of like a compost or manure tea, and give them some extra nutrients. This is the main reason why I need to get rid of Ted, is because I just had this all laid out with rock all the way around in a spiral, mulched it, planted irises in it, and Ted came through and just tore the crap out of it. He gets out and turns over all the rocks around the beds and eats all the worms and grubs that he finds, which, you know, like I said, luckily I didn't have any annuals and stuff planted, so it's not really going to hurt them. But I mean, it just total destruction. I mean, it looks like an earthquake came through here now. Was starting to look a little bit nicer. So Ted's got to go to the butcher, and I've got to invest in a new pig fence that's totally pig proof. Here at the front driveway is pretty much the only obvious elevation change on the property. I mean, it goes up to a mound, and I would wager that this is probably the highest point on the property. And, you know, it could be the highest point on this hill, which would be a good idea to put a water tower there, but I don't know if that's true or not. And this up here is the only hydrology experiment that I've got going right now. I dug this by hand with some buddies' help, and it's just a swale. And there's a bunch of runoff that comes, see, you can see there's some coming right now, comes from the top of this hill and runs down. And I'm trying to keep that water retained and let it soak into the ground as much as possible, because if not, it'll just flow right downhill and carry the topsoil and nutrients and everything with it. But you can see right here, it's working. I mean, there's a steady stream of water coming, and when it's raining real heavy, this whole thing will just fill up. So it's also working as a silt trap, getting a bunch of gravel and silt and things like that are flowing with the water. But all in all, that project turned out good and taught me some things. But unfortunately, I'm probably gonna have to trench for my water main right through there, so I'll have to end up filling it in. But you know, all in all, to get that probably 15 feet, it took 2 guys and many hours of pretty hard labor with a rock bar. So, you know, but I wanted to experiment with doing a small scale one by hand, just to get an idea of, take my time and get an idea of the concepts and everything like that. Now I feel like I've got it down, and once I get some more plans about the topography of the land and where I'm going to want to put the swales and where I'm going to want to put the retention ponds and stuff, then I'll invest some money in getting some heavy equipment out here and doing it all at once, or, you know, in a couple days, and as opposed to doing it over the course of 6 years. At this point in the driveway, the layout of the land really starts going a little bit more steeply down that way, because you can tell by how fast the water's running. See, that's got some definite drop to it, and it drops again. You can just kind of follow the streams here until the water all drains into the ground or wherever it goes downhill. Okay, then once you get down to about here, it starts to level off. So, and you can see there's a lot of standing water right there. All through here there's standing water, but there's a good little depression right there, and there's a real good depression over here. So, you know, this is going to be a road, but when we put the road through, I'm going to try to put some drainage to catch the runoff water, and this would be a good spot for a storage pond, possibly. Just judging by the layout and how it's already in a depression, wouldn't be that hard to steer the water there. I also definitely want to get the water off of this spot, because this is probably going to be a turnaround for the driveway for the shop that we're putting over here. So we'll have to probably build this up, and we can use the dirt from when we create some ditches. We can use that dirt to probably raise this up a little bit and get this higher, and also to catch a lot of this water that's coming down and getting into there. If we can divert it and get it into a retention pond over there, it'll keep it from building up as much over here. Now we're back a little bit closer to the tiny house, and there's a really interesting depression that runs all this way over onto the neighbor's property, and it runs off back there and kind of hooks around into this little depression right here. I'm not. I mean, this almost looks like a little river channel. It's kind of interesting the way that it's depressed like that. But I don't know if it's man-made or not. But the water doesn't seem to be flowing. It seems to be just standing in it. So interesting little depression, and I may choose to use that and just enlarge it or redirect it, or I'm not sure yet. But the idea is, right here I dug my first test pond, and I also did this one by hand, and it took 2 guys, a good day's work to dig a hole in there. The hole's probably only 4 or 5 foot deep by 4 foot in circumference, but it was just a test to see, because this area already fills up like this. It's already a natural depression, and I was digging down to see if I would ever hit rock, but it turns out no, I didn't hit rock in that 4 feet that I dug. So it's also got a real heavy clay to it, so that'll make easier digging, and the test proved successful. That little hole never has dried up since I dug it. So this would be a good location to dig a pond. The clay probably seals good, and it wouldn't be too hard to get it to seal back up after you dug it out, and that would catch all this water that's draining from here. And also back towards the tiny house, there's another little hill, and there's water coming this way from there. So it'd be a great spot for a large retention pond. See, now that we've crossed over this little valley right here, we're going back uphill towards the tiny house. You can tell because the water's flowing this way now. And I'll get out here with an A-frame level and a couple other different tools, maybe a water level, and try to figure out some more specifics of exactly where the topographical lines of elevation are. But for now, I'm still in the pre-planning phase. I'm just trying to get some ideas about where I'm going to go with it, and then I can get down to the measurements and the details and the nitty-gritty next phase. This issue is definitely going to have to be addressed. This is where I'd like to park for the tiny house here, and as you can see, there's a bunch of standing water on this side and that side, but there's already a natural downhill slope, so I might be able to dig some type of drainage ditches to help that, and also to assist the water in getting down to that retention pond. See, here on this side of the tiny house, we've got a buildup of water here, but right here you can see it's flowing downhill, and that pond is just right over there. So it's not going to take too much engineering to get that water downhill. See, it's still going, and away from, just to get it downhill and away from the tiny house. In conclusion, that's the general gist of the first phase of earthworks and hydrology projects that I'm going to be doing here on the property, because up here it's going to be the easiest to get the heavy equipment in. The roads are more compacted, and also it's where the utilities are going to be, and where the house is, and the gardens and everything like that. So that's this section of the property is going to take my my first push and my primary focus until that's done. But I also have a bunch of ideas about back by the pond and on other different areas of the property, but I'm just trying to keep my priorities straight and keep focused on what's the most pressing and going to benefit me the most in the long run, and that's to get this first section of the property done first. So that's the pre-planning phase. I've got an idea of where the water's going and everything like that. So I'm going to start putting pen to paper and making some ideas, looking at a Google Earth picture of the property and kind of getting a general outline of where I'm going to put things. And once I get it all planned out, then it'll be time for phase 2.